Welcome in to another edition of the Hops and Spirits podcast. This time around, we're going to do a little bit of both. Hopefully on this episode, a little bit of hops and spirits. But right now we're on the spirits part, and we have Jake Sulek back once again. He's the beverage director at West Main Crafting Company in Lexington. Jake, welcome back.
Welcome, Jonathan. Thank you.
Now, I always like I say, I always like to start things out nowadays with one tough question. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So for you, I figured this would be fun. I think I've done this once before with some of my guests, but what was your favorite subject in school?
English.
Ooh, English. Any particular reason?
I got really into comparative literature. I've always been really avid into writing and reading. So yeah, that's an easy question for me.
See, mine was math, which as I told someone else, it's funny because I eventually never did anything with math and went into English, which was my least favorite subject with in communication. So, I mean, it all makes sense, right?
That's how it happens.
Now, last time we talked, we did kind of holiday Christmas style cocktails, but hopefully the weather is warming up for wherever you are, and we can think maybe spring. Happy thoughts, getting out of the cold. So with that said, with spring right around the corner, what can people expect to see maybe on menus across the country in terms of the different flavors and different things like that? What kind of signifies spring, so to speak, in the cocktail world?
It's a perfect time to be talking about it, actually, as we're slowly thawing from all of the snow that we've had the last 2 weeks. But you'll see a combination of things happen on spring menus. First of all, people start to get away from the boozy, bitter, stirred cocktails. You'll see a lot less Sazerac and old-fashioned style cocktails. You'll start to see a lot more carbonated beverages, a lot more Spritz style drinks hitting the menu. And I think you'll also see menus start to trend away from some of the heavier spirits. You won't see very many smoky Scotch cocktails anymore, or some of the heavier blackstrap rums, even cask-strength bourbon. People will start to veer away from that into lighter spirits. I think this is the season when we start to see vodka and gin start to come back on menus.
And now for you all at West Main, you guys are going to getting ready to release your kind of spring-summer cocktail menu. I'm always curious as to how long it takes you guys to come up with something like this, because I know sometimes you do have staples that'll continue year after year, or you might just tweak it a little bit. But I'm guessing too, you also always want to add some newer stuff to always keep people interested and intrigued and trying something new when they come back. So how does creating a menu work, and about how long does it take you guys to do that?
Yeah, for us it's a pretty long process. I know some bars will change their menu every 3 months. They'll take a quarterly approach, so you've got a pretty quick turnaround on research and development. We tend to do ours yearly, so we'll release one menu in spring actually each year, and that'll be 6 months of spring and summer cocktails, and then we'll do a small mid-year swap for fall and winter selection. But overall, thematically, the whole menu encompasses an entire year, and it'll take us about a year to put that together. The physical aspects of it, just writing it and getting the pictures and all of the cocktails finished, that's probably only about 4 months. But all of the actual conceptual work behind it, how we're going to make these ingredients, what ingredients we can source, where we can get them from, that takes about a whole year to do.
I mean, like when you say something like sourcing and all that, I mean, you guys are going the whole gamut. It's not just you're throwing two things in. You guys are kind of almost a full developed recipe, almost like you would think of in cooking. You've got a couple of parts of this and that. Like, I mean, does it start out where you kind of are writing it out and trying things and then slowly work new things in? I mean, how does that work when you're creating a cocktail?
Yeah, it's a lot like that. Some of it's trial and error. You'll often get a great idea. You try it. It's not exactly how you wanted it to be, so you'll tweak it over a series of tests. Sometimes you'll completely whiff, and you'll have to throw out the concept altogether. It just doesn't work. But a lot of times it's kind of a balance between those two. But we'll often get an idea, try it, because we're looking for a specific flavor or effect, and then we'll just really try to dial it down. Something as simple as our gin and tonic. It's on tap here at West Main, and the tonic water is actually made from scratch. We make our own quinine syrup. We actually carbonate it in-house off of a CO2 tank and then keg the whole thing. So if we would use a different style of gin, then we could actually tweak the quinine syrup and add different flavors to it, something that's going to complement the gin that's going into it.
Well, that's fascinating. I never would have thought of having, a gin and tonic already on tap and ready to go. But I mean, when this is what you guys do, your cocktail bar, always coming up with really cool and unique things. And speaking of some of those recipes, what are a couple that, for the spring that maybe we can make at home, kind of that single or maybe two servings, that can come together and we can pull it off at home with some confidence?
My go-to spring drink, French 75.
Okay.
Our French 75 at West Main, the way that we do it's actually one of our best-selling cocktails. But it's a cocktail that's very easy to do at home. You can demystify the French 75 by just thinking of it as being basically a gin lemonade topped up with some sparkling wine is all that it is. So you can start with some simple syrup. Simple syrup is just a long-winded way of saying a simple sugar solution. So if you take 1 part sugar and 1 part water, you can cook that in a small pan over a stove just for a couple minutes until it dissolves and you've got simple syrup. So you take half an ounce of simple syrup, 3/4 ounce of lemon, or if you don't have a measuring cup on hand, that's going to be approximately half of your average sized lemon that you'd find at a grocery store. And then 1 shot of gin, which is about 1.5 ounces. Just shake that with ice, strain it into an ice-filled Collins glass. Ice-filled Collins glass is going to be the tall, skinny ones. Nothing like a pint glass. That'll work, but you'll be tanked after 2 of these. So you want to go hit smaller glass. Just fill it up with ice and then top it up with sparkling wine of your choice. You could do something cheap like a Prosecco or a Cava, works out fine. But what you've basically gotten is a gin lemonade topped up with champagne. We think that the French 75, the name itself, comes from the World War I field gun, which was a French 75 millimeter gun. So the idea is the extra champagne or sparkling wine in the cocktail actually hits you with an extra kick like a gun.
Gotcha. That's fascinating too, and that sounds exactly like what you would want in spring. Getting a little warmer, you might be able to actually sit outside now and have these drinks, in the evening. So I love the sound of that, and like you said, it's very simple, and that's one thing I always love talking to you is I feel like I can pull these off at my house. Now, whether I can or not, that's a totally different story. But I always feel like I can pull it off. Do you maybe have another type recipe that we might be able to pull off as well?
Yeah. This is the season for spritzes as well. And what both of these recipes have in common is that we're serving them over ice, a lot of ice, because as the weather starts to get warm up, you are sitting outside. You are enjoying drinks a little bit more. You're not trying to warm up so much as, stay hydrated, quench your thirst. And so having that ice gives you a little bit of extra dilution. It keeps you from getting drunk so quickly, and it also keeps you hydrated at the same time. Whereas in the wintertime, we tend to go for the smaller size, booze-forward drinks, something like a Manhattan. So in keeping with the French 75, another really easy drink to make at home, we'll just call it the Spritz. It's kind of a general term that's used all over the world. Italy and France are 2 countries that really have perfected this. We don't have a big Spritz culture in the United States yet, but you're starting to see a lot of books on the subject be published, and I think it's starting to be one of those trending style of drinks. But really easy, you can take anything. Even a Collins glass, a goblet, highball. We like to serve ours in wine glasses. Just go ahead and fill it up with nice ice cubes. Put half an ounce of liqueur. That's as simple as it is. It could be an elderflower liqueur. It could even be some sort of simple syrup that you have at home that's maybe flavored. It can be an amari from Italy, something like Aperol or Campari. Just 1 ounce, 2 ounces of sparkling wine, and then top it up with however much soda water as you want. I usually just add 1 or 2 ounces, just a splash. But the idea is the combination of the sweet and the carbonation is going to kind of offset each other. And what you get is a really refreshing carbonated drink. Especially if you throw a few pieces of fruit in there, maybe a fresh citrus slice. Absolutely delicious. It's a formula 1-2-1 is how I just teach it to bartenders. You can't go wrong with it.
I was gonna say, I mean that is about as straightforward as it gets when you talk about the formula of making a drink. Now, we talked to obviously nowadays we've still got to be very cognizant of how many people we have for events or anything like that. But if you're smart and can do things properly and socially distanced, you can still have a nice gathering. What's maybe a larger batch cocktail that someone can throw together if they're hosting some friends over for just a nice evening, and can have a nice drink and ready for them to go.
Going back to the same idea of the French 75, because I think the French 75 itself is kind of a riff on a much older drink called Tom Collins, which is the first gin punch. It was created in the early 1800s. But this is still one of my favorite get-together kind of drinks because it fits a pitcher perfectly. If you got a 40 or 60-ounce iced tea pitcher, this is the drink for that. Just take 4 ounces of simple syrup, 6 ounces of lemon juice, that's going to be about 4 lemons, and then 16 ounces of a nice gin. You don't have to go high on the proof here. Don't skimp on the quality, but get something between 80 and 94 proof. Most London-style gins will be in that range. Put those in the pitcher, ice it up, stir it for about a minute. That'll chill all of the ingredients down, but it's also going to add a little bit of water. That's going to dilute it down so the gin doesn't quite have a bite. Fill it back up with ice, and then just top it up with a bottle of sparkling water.
I love that, and that sounds like something that most people will enjoy that, and that's what you're looking for. So
it's a sparkling lemonade.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I love the French 75 kind of, where those two play hand in hand. So if you're enjoying the other one by yourself or with your significant other or roommates or whatever, and then you have this one on hand, you're already kind of halfway there to making it. And you're kind of, well, not kind of, you are an expert at being a bartender. So is there any ingredient that might sound like spring that people should just go, no, that's not what you want to be trying to put in a cocktail?
This is a hard question. As a bartender, I never like to tell people what they should like. But I also don't think that what you like should limit what you're willing to try. Just because you like something doesn't mean that you shouldn't try something else. Especially given our options nowadays in the spirits category. So many different things are available to us. So many brands are starting out. I think it's useful for your palate to go ahead and be adventurous and try new things. I would stay away from infused rums. I think as soon as the weather starts to get warm out, they're thinking tropical vibes, they're thinking the beach, and everybody wants to reach for a bottle of Malibu. I think you should put it away. Most infused rums are actually liqueurs. They're chocked full of sugar. They're full of artificial ingredients. You can achieve the same thing at home by chopping up a pineapple and just putting it in a jar full of rum. So yeah, stay away from the Malibu in spring.
I like that one. And my last question for you, because we're trying to make sure people can learn how to be a good bartender at home. What's something that they could find useful that they may not have that would be a good addition to any home bar?
Probably the Hawthorne Strainer. I think that's the tool that most people, the first time you're learning how to make cocktails, you probably go out, you buy a shaker. Hopefully you bought a jigger to measure things out and a spoon. But I think the Hawthorne Strainer is one that people probably don't think about. If you've never worked in a restaurant or worked behind a bar, you probably don't understand what it does. But it is the round device with a spring that's going to fit in the top of your shaker, and it's going to allow you to strain the ingredients of the shaker after you've shaken out while it catches all of the big pieces of ice. Now, it won't catch small pieces of ice, but you can use it in a couple different ways. It'll work great on your shaker, but also, something going back to what we just talked about, the large format Tom Collins, a giant pitcher of boozy gin lemonade. You could actually throw the Hawthorne Strainer on top of that and strain it out into glasses for your guests. So it's got a lot of different uses that you can use it for.
I like that, and that sounds like something that is simple enough to have and use, and it'll be put to some really great use along with all the recipes. And Jake, like I always tell you, it's a pleasure to talk to you. The recipes you give us are pretty straightforward, but you're making some really great drinks that I'm pretty sure we can wow people with, that make them think that we know exactly what we're doing.
Good, that makes me happy.
Well, Jake, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Joining us now on the Hops and Spirits podcast once again is Kevin Patterson, Master Cicerone and National Beer Judge. He's also the manager of the Beer Trap craft beer store and bar in Lexington. Kevin, glad to have you back.
Great. Thank you for having me back. I've enjoyed being a guest before, and I'm sure I'll enjoy it again today. So thank you very much.
Yeah, now before we've talked about kind of the fall beers, the winter beers, but the weather, at least in Kentucky, has gotten a little warmer. I think for most it has as well, which gives us hope that spring is here. So we're going to talk about spring beers. So what can, especially as someone that sees the beer on the shelves and also gets to serve it to at the bar as well, what can people expect when it comes to spring beers? Because I know winter it was a lot more darker beers, maybe more ABV. What are we expecting in the spring? I'm guessing it's not that.
You'd be surprised. You still have some of that. Because, let's face it, we do get breweries distributed here from all over the country. So winter hangs onto the northern territories and Midwestern territories a little longer. The southern territories, not so much. And so it depends on where that brewery is located. If they send beers to us, then sometimes they can send darker beers deeper into the season. Then again, you get some southern breweries or western breweries that'll send the lighter stuff a little bit early. So you do get a mix, but here in Kentucky, the demand from our customers is trending a little bit in that lighter direction. Of course, we do see it transitional as the gardens and the farms start to produce more crops and stuff. We start to see more of that seasonal trend to lighter fare, and the same thing happens in beer. So we start to see people asking for a little bit more of a standard strength IPA. They don't want the Imperials as much anymore. They start to look for the sours a little bit more. Those beers have always been popular, but during the summer, during wintertime, you see a lot of Belgian quads through the Christmas break, and then after Christmas, it seems like it's a lot of Imperial porters, Imperial stouts. But when you get into those late winter months like we are now, and we start to look forward to spring, there are some styles that seem to do the crop up that you don't think would do so. And they're still holding on to the winter months, the beer styles like barley wines, Doppelbocks, and so a little bit more of a malty, richer kind of flavor that way. Oddly enough, when the weather starts to warm up a little bit, they don't really go for the brown ales and porters. Those are more fall beers that people are asking about. But right now, the amber ales, people are asking a little bit more about amber ales, just something a little bit more sensible, something more like almost an ESB type of beer, something with a little bit more of a malt backbone. To kind of warm you up a little bit, but something a little bit more balanced and less extreme on any of those fronts. However, you do see a lot of folks, they want to jump right into the middle of summer. They want the Christmas clean to sour. They want session IPAs. They're ready to open the pools and, grab their 6-pack of, summer shandies or whatever and hit the ground running. So you do get people kind of jumping the gun, but then you have some beers and some breweries trying to hold back a little bit.
So basically, it's kind of, we're at that crossover point where you kind of can see a little bit of everything. But for me, I know, obviously you mentioned it. You're starting to get the farmers back. It's kind of like everything else. You're starting to see a few more different things on the shelf at the grocery store, and I'm guessing this is maybe where we start to see maybe like a strawberry Kolsch, something that you can kind of sit outside on your front porch, back porch, even around a bonfire or something like that, and enjoy as well.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the trend here recently has been, okay, open the doors to the beer trap. The sun is shining down. It's going to be in the 60s. And people, they're going to come in and they're going to ask, let me get this light thing. Let me get this Urban Artifact beer that's a sour, or let me get something more of a standard strength IPA. But then as the sun goes down, it starts to get chill. It'll drop down maybe into the 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. Then they rush inside and, oh, you have this quad on tap. Let me get that Belgian quad. So you do have them switching gears even in the same drinking session as well. So it's nice to have a transition. One of the neat things about the cyclical nature of beer drinking is once we do get into full-flown spring and summer, those two summer seasons seem to mirror each other quite a bit. So the same beers are popular in deep spring will be popular throughout the summer and maybe even early fall. And those beers are going to be built around refreshment, crispness, cleanliness, high rates of drinkability. You're breaking out the bigger glasses, maybe even the mugs, and fill them with pilsners and lagers. something meant for thirst quenching. When you get finished mowing the lawn, you kind of want something a little easier on the palate to take to the shower. So those kind of beers are kind of what you're dealing with in spring and summer. Just the more palatable, easy drinking, lighter stuff, a little bit more effervescent, a little drier on the palate. But then in the fall and the winter, that's when you get styles that kind of mimic themselves a little bit there too. And you're not looking at refreshing beers. You're not looking at crisp. You're not looking at clean. The mantra changes completely. Now you're looking for beers with the savory flavors, the deep roast, the more robust flavors, the more alcohol, the imperial status beers that hold on to more sugars, and then you have to do more things to balance it. And before you know it, in the fall and the winter, when you're drinking beers, you're thinking about beers that have more complexity, more depth, more character. You're not looking for them to be refreshing beers. You're looking for them to have a lot more culinary impact on the palate, something a little richer. Food goes the same way, and beer is not close behind. It'll mimic that trend just as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong too. A lot of breweries will basically whatever maybe their seasonal is now will kind of go through the summer. I mean, it's more of a longer because, like you said, the seasons kind of mimic each other. So because the one that comes to mind is Bell's Oberon. That kind of comes out about now, and then you see it for a good while. But then once the weather kind of gets a little colder, it's gone. But that's kind of the first beer that came to my mind.
Yeah, I mean, just random guy number 47. He comes into the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Oberon, when's that come out? And I'm like, it's going to be pretty close, just in a couple more weeks. Hang in there. Is that a seasonal? He says. I'm like, yeah, it's a seasonal. It goes 11 and a half months. And so Oberon does have a very extended season on theirs. But a lot of breweries, they have a certain regimented process they go through with their scheduling, brewing schedule. And they don't have a lot of time for seasonal. So they'll do like one big batch. And when it's gone, it's gone. It may be gone a couple of weeks, maybe a month at that. So breweries get to decide how they're going to handle those seasonal trends as well. I think even in Florida, Bell's Oberon is produced year round. So I think Bell's does have a kind of a product, part of the brewery that brews for the Florida market. And it's a year round beer for the Florida market only, which I think is kind of neat and fitting.
Yeah, definitely, because that's one that I always look for on tap if I'm out and it's nice out, and I'm at whether it's the beer trap or the Bear and the Butcher, some places got the doors open and everything. It's a perfect beer for that. You mentioned some of the styles. One that typically comes to mind is the Ghost of the sour beers. I mean, they're out most of the year, but typically now is when I think more people go, hey, like you said, especially when the sun's out. Let me try one of those. So what can people expect with a sour beer? Because that might frighten some when they hear sour. But what is a sour Gose style?
All right, so the Gose style was invented in northern Germany around the Goslar region near Leipzig. And traditionally, whenever people made beer, they were really at the mercy of whatever grains grew in their area. For them, it was wheat, maybe some small portions of barley, but it was largely wheat. So they used a combination of those two grains. But the real catalyst was whatever's floating around in the air. Before the microscope came along, we were able to control fermentation very well. We were aware of it. We just didn't know how to control it particularly well. So you brew a batch of beer, and if your region had more bacteria than yeast, then guess what? That's going to be the catalyst. It's going to eat those sugars and turn it into alcohol and acidity. When yeast ferments beer, and this is kind of the way it goes for most places on the planet, you get more alcohol yield out whenever fermentation occurs rather than sour yield. Fermentation does produce a little bit of acidity in all beers. It's just that in beers like pale ales and porters, you don't notice it as much. What you do notice is the alcohol. Yeast just has a tendency to produce a lot of alcohol when it ferments. Bacteria works the opposite. Bacteria almost produces a whole lot of acid and very modest alcohol. That's the reason why you don't see a whole lot of imperial Goses. Brewers have to work really, really hard and get really clever when they want to make a high strength Gose or Berliner Weiss. So what you end up getting with Gose is you end up with a lot of acidity. And that acidity means it's going to play a big sour flavor on the palate. And most people who aren't used to sour beers, they're taken back of how acidic these beers actually are. Very puckering. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably well versed in the beer world, so you know how puckering some of these Goses and Berliner Weisses can be. And the brewer now we do have microscopes and we have pH meters, and we actually can take samples and taste them. Brewers can actually decide when to stop that fermentation with the bacteria so they can lock in whatever sourness they want. They don't have to go complete sour. They can go modestly tart, and they can go somewhere in between. Generally, we don't want enamel stripping sourness, but some people come in and they kind of do want that. But yeah, a lot of your sours anymore, what Americans have done to the Goza style is they've taken it, really cleaned it up. They've really eliminated the need for the coriander and for the sea salt and those sort of things, even though you do see that around a little bit. What they have done, though, is they're planted that with fruit flavors. Berliner Weiss style, the really sour ones from Berlin, they were traditionally, you would use some sort of fruit syrup to add to those to give them some character, give them some balance, give them some extra flavor that the sour beer did not carry on its own. American brewers have taken a lot of liberties and saying, well, let's just add the fruit to the beer. So now you do get guys like Urban Artifact and a few others who specialize in those flavors. They produce a whole lot of fruit beers on top of the sour flavors. And when we talk about the sour flavors, you're talking about things that might mimic white wine or cider or something really piquant, really dry like that. When you add the fruit on top of there, you really are looking at beer comparisons that use terms like Bellini or sangria or some other kind of flavors like that, because they start to trend in that direction a little bit more, which is why you see those beers really popular for brunches. Now that you're right, you can open the doors to these restaurants. People want to spill outside, and people are getting more comfortable working in the COVID climate, going out to eat now. And so, yeah, when you sit down, you don't have to go with a wine product. You can go with a beer product and achieve the same effect for the spring and summer.
Yeah, I think one place that does that kind of cross combo really well is Rheingeist. If you pay attention to their cans, the Zango and I can't think of the other one, right? The Wowie, things like that. They have a slightly different logo. It's not their cider, but it is definitely that nice little cross. And I just noticed the Zango back on shelves. I think either this week or last week. Another thing that I always think about too is you mentioned it. The fruited ales can kind of come into play a little bit more. Like I said, a strawberry kolsch or even just a fruited lager. What can people expect with those? Is it just going to be totally fruit, or is it going to be a nice little balance?
Again, breweries get to decide on how extreme to take the fruits. When I first got into beer, which is about 1,000 years ago, the old timers who taught me about home brewing, it taught me how to create beer, how to judge beer. They said that the beer style should stand out first and foremost. That whatever flavor you're adding to it should not dominate the flavor, but should add some complexity, add some charm, add a uniqueness to it without taking away from the base beer. So now you have brewers that sometimes will adhere to that. They'll just want a hint of apple or a hint of raspberry, hint of cherry. But then you have other breweries who just really do. They want to turn these beers into absolute smoothies. I reviewed a beer earlier today by Cliff Harder Brewing Company. It's called Max Profits. And it poured just this extremely turbid mauve because there's a ton of puree in there. You can tell they did not put any thought into filtering this beer at all. It is like you can see the silts just kind of laying right there. If you look really close, you can actually see live guppies floating around in it. That's how much fruit and stuff is into these beers. And so you can take them to real extreme. When you taste this beer, it does not taste like a beer at all. It tastes much more like a smoothie or an icy or something you get out of a shake more so than a beer. It does have some sweetness. It does have some bitterness. It does have the ingredients that qualifies it as beer. It has a process that qualifies it as the beer, but taste-wise, it couldn't be further away from beer. So it just depends on which brewery, if they want to hold on to tradition or they want to try and push into something else altogether. The old timers, they would say these young whippersnappers are being reckless. They're being irresponsible. They criticize them quite a bit. But I think it's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun writing that review because I was able to use a lot of tongue-in-cheek terminology. I was really able to pick on the brewery quite a bit and still end the review with, it's quite delicious.
Yeah. No, and I get that too, because I think on the first Under the Influence roundtable I did with some folks on the craft beer, we were talking about the Imperial, the smoothie style. And, long ago it used to be, I had a Sierra Nevada or, just something on that level to get you into the craft beer. Now it's, I had a banana, raspberry, mango beer, and that's how people get into it now. But, that's, if that gets you into craft beer, then that's not a bad thing in my mind.
I agree. And the one thing I've always taken a lot of pride in, alcohol started differentiating itself in brands and products about 1,000 years ago. That's when we started deciding, okay, ales are supposed to be made of this stuff. Wine's supposed to be made of that. Eventually, when we have distillation techniques, we had bourbon was going to be this, gin was going to be that, vodka was going to be something else. And so they invented these really tight rules of what these products could be. Beer is the one that never really hemmed that in. Beer is the one that says, we'll use that barley from over there on that continent. We'll pair with this grain on that continent. And we'll use these hops from here and those hops from there. We'll use, nowadays you're seeing hops from the Pacific Northwest. We're seeing hops from Japan. We're seeing hops from Australia, all used in the same beer. And so whenever you're looking at, what is brewers thinking when they make these beers, they're thinking the world is my pantry. And when the world is your pantry, why limit to just grains and hops? Let's go to fruits. Let's go through some of the flavors. Like Hofharda, they had another beer, the world's baldest Congo line. And then there's a banana split imperial stout. And yeah, when you taste it, it's like, whoa, that's a big stout, but that's a big banana split too. It has all these flavors rolled in. Evil Twin, one of the more recent beers we had from them is blue raspberry. And when you pour it, it doesn't pour blue necessarily, it pours green because you put the base beer, which is probably golden, then you put the blue to it. We learned in third grade, you mix those two together, you end up with green. So it pours green. And then when you taste it, I'm like, holy crap, my mind went to whenever I was like 8 years old, going to the mall and going to that little candy store, and they had these ices that you pour out of the thing. It tastes like that, but it didn't have sweetness. It had sourness and bitterness instead. It's a sour IPA with blue raspberry. So what you're getting is you're getting a lot of breweries that are sort of saying, can we use cocktails as a way to inspire our beer? Can we use banana splits as a way to inspire our beer? Can we use smoothies? And so you're seeing a lot of these inspirations from a lot of other places. And when the world is your pantry, you don't have to stop. You can keep going. You can push. And as long as there's a market there for dupes like me to buy these things, drink them, and talk about them, then they're going to keep doing it.
No, hey, I'm right there with you. I've got a few Braxton smoothies in my beer fridge. Even got a couple 450 Norths, which if you know anything about them, I mean, they put pixie sticks in beer, and you name it. They, like you said, it's a wide variety of what can be in a beer. One thing I do want to kind of bring back to, we talked about like an urban artifact. Some of these fruit beers, typically they're maybe more on the lighter side, but some of them can actually creep up to 6, 7, 8%, and you may not taste that way because, like you said, it brings you back to the icy days or a banana split day. So people do need to pay attention to what is actually on the can, or maybe double check with the bartender how much ABV these things have.
Absolutely, because they can look very innocuous. They can look very innocent. You have an Anderson Valley Goza a couple of times. You think all Gozas are built that way? Not at all. Urban Artifact, I can't remember the name of the beer, but it's a scaled up version of Gadget. And so it's scaled up to 14% alcohol. So even though the tendency of bacteria is not to produce a whole lot of alcohol, brewers have learned how to use new techniques, how to stop fermentation when it comes to the level of acidity, but how to continue a yeast fermentation long before after that to get more alcohol built in, more flavor. So yeah, always look at the alcohol content, because the days where sour beers were synonymous with low alcohol beers is gone. So now they can be really, really high. Something else you got to look out for is some of these sour ales, they balance with a lot of stuff, not just barley and fruit. They'll balance with lactose. And if you're sort of have this aversion to lactose, they don't always say so on the label. So it takes a lot of homework sometimes for the consumer to sort of say, if I have a problem with a certain ingredient, to make sure it's not in there. I think most of the wiser breweries will say lactose. They will say whether it's peanuts or hazelnuts or almonds. So they'll list these things, especially if they know that there's a high rate of aversion among the populace, to make sure that, hey, we don't make our customers sick. We love them. We want to keep spending money. We got to take care of them. So we got to look out for those things too, not just the alcohol content.
And then before I let you go, I always got to ask this: what are some breweries or beers that people should be on the lookout that you've been enjoying or that they would enjoy?
One of the neatest new breweries that came to the local market was Fatheads near Cleveland, Ohio. They've traditionally made some really stellar Midwestern or West Coast style IPAs, but they're starting to get into the hazy game too. They make some really nice beers there. A few collaborations kind of roll through the beer trap. We've had some of their stuff on tap. The Hop Juju, Headhunter, those are very popular. But those are brands that's been out for a very long time that people are happy they don't have to travel to get anymore or trade to get anymore. They can actually just come down to your local beer store and pick those up. So the Fathead stuff's a very nice welcome. There's a lot of breweries that are kind of toying with the idea of maybe coming into the market. I know Firestone Walker, they've been looking into the market for a while. Now that the restraints of COVID are starting to lift, I expect them maybe to make a move, and I hope that we're part of that expansion. That could be a lot of fun. Sun King has had a few products on the market here locally in the last couple of years, but it looks like they're wanting to pull out some big guns. We have 3 of their beers on tap right now that's pretty intense. One is the Shadowproof with coconut. That's a bourbon barrel aged imperial stout, and it tastes like absolutely like a Mounds candy bar.
Ooh.
It's really nice, and it's clocks in at 15% alcohol.
That's one you got to watch.
Exactly, and we have 2 other beers on tap. Whiskey Barrel Quad, that's really good. The pours really dark, almost like a stout. Another is a barley wine. It's a bourbon barrel barley wine. So those 3 are on tap right now, and so it's nice to see some new offerings. I think during COVID, a lot of breweries, they stuck to the core brands. They stuck to what they know. And I think customers kind of react to that. They're very content to just come and get a 6-pack of something. Just, I want to turn my brain off. I want to buy this beer. I want to sit on my porch and stay home and healthy together. Just drink these beers. You drink them all time of day and night. Doesn't matter. No, there are no rules this time, like a year ago. But now I think we're starting to work back into a more normal pattern. So I think breweries are like, you know what, there is a market out there. Bars are opening up. The taps are flowing. We need to start making some beers that's going to encourage people to want to drink these. And so get customers engaged by making some more unique brands like the Sun King stuff has done. Fatheads is a very bold move to try an expansion right now. But I think the timing is right. If breweries want to extend into Kentucky, I think there's some room.
Well, Kevin, like I always said, you're a wealth of knowledge. I always appreciate you hopping on, and hopefully the weather will stay warm and everyone can get out safely and enjoy a few beers.
Jonathan, it's always my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
I love it. We definitely hit the hoppy side and the spirit side this episode. I appreciate Jake and Kevin both hopping on again to talk with us. Like I always say, it's great to have those 2 guys on. It's like a tag team effort because Jake gives you the in-season cocktails and some ideas to maybe make at your home bar. Kevin lets you kind of know what spring beers or what beers are in season when you go out and what you can expect. And if you're looking for other ideas or other beers that maybe in season different times of the year, check out our past episodes with Jake and Kevin. We've had them on several times. They're a blast every time. It's so informative. Really appreciate them. And we appreciate you, which is why we want you to be our drinking buddy. That's right. You can join our Drinking Buddies monthly club where we do a giveaway every month. All sorts of goodies. This month we've got some t-shirts, some swag from Traverse City Company, Whiskey Company, West 6 Brewing Company, even Goodwood Brewing Company as well. And then you get a chance, or your choice, whoever wins, of either picking something from my bourbon bar or beer fridge. There are some limitations there, so check that out. But guess what? It's free. All you do is got to sign up. Go to any of our social media pages at Hop Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Click the link and just follow the directions to sign up for our Drinking Buddies monthly giveaway club. Like I said, we've got some great giveaways. You'll also get a weekly email that has some news. We do a 6-pack of news. You also get some information about the podcast and a whole bunch of other fun things. Don't forget to check out our partners in crime, One Sip Beer Review. They're on Instagram at One Sip Beer Review with near daily beer review videos, some cool giveaways, and a whole lot of fun. That's at One Sip Beer Review on Instagram. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you to check out our 60-second, give it a try, 60-second highlights that we release every Sunday night on our social media and our YouTube page, where we highlight a different beer, whiskey, bourbon, cocktail, or something similar in that vein every Sunday night at 8 Eastern on our social media pages and YouTube. Remember, if you can, give it a try. And until next time, cheers, everyone.